Welcome to Uncomfortable Growth Uncut, where we celebrate those who defy fear, embrace growth, and live without regret. In this episode, we peel back the layers to reveal the person behind the profile with Rose Herceg. Rose takes us on her personal growth journey in the corporate world, challenging the status quo with her small business sensibilities and commitment to transparency. She demonstrates kindness and servant leadership. Tune in to how Rose is navigating the corporate giants with a scrappy style and why telling the uncomfortable truth is the key to her success. So welcome to Uncomfortable Growth Uncut. I have with me today the incredible Rose Herceg. She's the president of WPP across Australia and New Zealand, but also a very inspirational person to talk with, to be around, and get to know. So today I'm hoping that we'll get to know a little bit more about her. But welcome, Rose. Thank you for coming on the program.
Oh, thank you for having me, Rowena. It's a pleasure.
So we'll jump straight in. So for our listeners, the format is that each person gets to share their uncomfortable growth story, and it can come from any part of their life. So it may be current, it may be from the past, it may be from work, it may be from things beyond work. So I'm just going to open it up by saying, Rose, what is the uncomfortable growth story you'd like to share with us?
There are a lot, but I think the most recent is probably the most interesting because I still think it's ironic, in fact, that I'm the president of WPP in Australia and New Zealand, because I never imagined that that would be where I would be. And anyone who knows me knows that I have spent the bulk of my career in small business, self-employed. And so the uncomfortable growth story, I guess, is doing a job in a very big business that is multinational, that is global, in a way that suits my small business sensibility that seems to be working. And so for me, I came into the role thinking to myself, this job might sand off my edges, and I'm not a big fan of that at all. But ultimately, there was a lack of comfort, or I was uncomfortable about the idea of a job like this making me not be the person that I am or the leader that I am, which is a very particular style, which is very scrappy, very small business, and accepting the role and hoping that I would be able to craft it in a way and in an image and in a way that suits me. So for me, that's uncomfortable because my understanding of corporate gigs is that you have to be very much by the book and you have to be of a particular stripe. And I don't follow any of that, and I don't fit into that mold. So that's probably that's the long and the short of it in terms of uncomfortable growth.
Yeah. So I'd like to dig into this a little bit if we could, because something you just referenced, but I'd like to hear more about it, which is what were your perceptions, maybe versus the reality of what you thought corporate was? And then also, how does that play with your identity? So you talked about how that's not how you see yourself. So the perception versus the reality, but also what you've discovered around your identity. I'd love to kind of start to get into those two areas, if that's okay with you.
Sure. Ask anything you like. I think for me, when I think about corporate Australia or corporate America, I think of all the things that I dislike. I think about bingo. I think about the way that people obfuscate. They avoid answering the question. They follow the rule book of the way you're supposed to interpret the corporate world, how you should show up, how you should speak in meetings, how you should present. And I am none of those things. I like people to speak in plain English. I like people to cut to the chase. I like people to tell the truth about what's working, what's not. I don't need people managing up. I don't like any of the corporate buzzwords that I hear all the time, not necessarily inside WPP, because we've certainly put an end to a lot of that under my leadership, because I think a lot of the people know what I prefer. But when I look around, and even when I look at the way that Hollywood depicts
Mm.
corporate anything, it's a turn off. It's a turn off. It isn't fun. It isn't scrappy. It isn't interesting. It isn't any of the things that I think are the good things about business today. And
Mm.
so my perception of that is not what I want to represent, but that could be simply me being a little unfair and a little judgy about
Mhm.
corporation. It probably isn't like that everywhere. And
Mm.
certainly in Australia for us now and in New Zealand, we reject that as being part of the way we roll. We just want to be more honest, more
Mhm.
direct, more fun. And I
Mm.
think you can both be exceptional at the work and much more honest and carry a level of integrity, and you can do both at once.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, you've got a very long and illustrious career, and you've worked with big corporations in multiple contexts, well before this role. So, I'm interested in just your, because it's a very clear and strong perception that you had or have, right? We can get into that too, but you've had your experience with big corporations and also what you dislike about it. And I guess my first question is, are you finding that that's how organizations are? And so you guys are like the antidote, or are organizations maybe not quite like that? So, yeah, how does that play out?
Yeah, I think organizations are not all the same. That's the first thing to say. Every organization has its own rhythm and its own culture and its
Mm.
own cadence and how it goes about the business of getting the job done.
Mm.
To answer the first part of that question, because I was always coming into a very large business as a small business, when I had my
Mhm.
first business, Pop House, I was able to come in, do my thing, and then leave. So
Mm.
it's so much easier when you come into and a lot of our clients were the big companies. They were Combank, they were
Mm.
Pfizer, they were Sanitarium, they were Unilever. They were great big businesses, both multinational and national. But
Mm.
because I could come in, do my thing, and we could then go,
Mm.
I wasn't playing within the world of the corporation. I could play by my own rules. I could do my job well, hopefully, and then leave. I
Mhm.
think I've been unfair in the way that I think about the corporation. I think that not every corporation is the same. Some are better at hearing truth. Some are better at
Mhm.
uh, flat structures. Some are better at dispensing with the buzzwords. Others not so much. So I think I needed to really be honest with myself and say, Rose, not everybody is painted with the same brush. Things have evolved since you had Pop House. Let people define themselves, but don't ever fall victim or don't fall prey to what I think is the laziness that some companies can have, which is to hide behind doublespeak or hide behind the process or the methodology. If
Yep.
something isn't working, call it out. If a leader isn't being effective, call that out. If people aren't being kind, call that out. And I think that, the corporation can hide a lot of myriad, a large repository of sins because
Mm.
you can hide behind things. And I like things to be exposed, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, because I almost did the reverse of what you're doing, where I went from big business, big companies, big multinationals to now running my own consultancy. And it's interesting because I do think that big organizations want to hear the truth, but they're sometimes afraid to hear the truth. And so you've got that tension inside, and it really depends on the leader setting permission. Because, even in the same organization, there was a phase where it was encouraged and everyone had a very high level of psychological safety and they could speak openly and outwardly. And it wasn't about hierarchy to challenge, it was just about, does that make sense? And then there was another phase where there was suddenly no, like that's a career limiting move
Yeah.
by behaving with such transparency. And there was a lot of fear that suddenly bled into the organization, and you could see what a fast impact that had. So I like your point on, now that you're in a big leadership role, like president of WPP, um, how you set the tone from the top.
And that's the thing, because I think telling truth to power
Mm-hmm.
somewhere along the line became very hard, but it shouldn't be.
Mm-hmm.
It shouldn't be. We should be able to tell the truth about what's working in a company, what
Mm-hmm.
isn't, products that we're selling on behalf of our clients, whether it's a good product or not very good product, whether there's room for improvement. And you can say that honestly, you can say it with great kindness, and you can say it in a way that allows for you to find a better solution. And I don't understand why a lot of these things have become more hard than they should be. They shouldn't be that hard. It shouldn't be hard for any one of the people that work at WPP in Australia and New Zealand, of which there are 2,577. It shouldn't be hard for any one of them to say, hey, Rose, I disagree. This is a better way. I
Mm-hmm.
don't accept the premise of what you've put forward. I think there might be a better way for us to solve that problem. I think it's become hard. I wonder why. I wonder whether we're living in a society where the path of least resistance is the one that we take. Nothing gets better unless people can tell the truth.
Mm-hmm.
They should tell the truth kindly. I'm not a fan of people being blunt and unkind. There's a difference between being ruthlessly articulate and ruthless. These are very different concepts. And
Yes.
I've pulled up some of our leaders who have told the truth, but they've done it with a dollop of unkindness. There's no room for that, but you
Yep.
can do both.
Yep. And I love that because, in so many ways, people hear truthfulness so much better with kindness, and it's done with respect. And even if we think about the importance and the need for diversity and inclusivity, it has to be underpinned by honesty to explore and understand differences, but also kindness so that people can hear and learn and agree how to move forward. And I actually love how you articulate that. I know other companies like Netflix have talked about brilliant jerks and how they have no room for brilliant jerks. And I think that also captures it, right? Because
Yeah,
they're brilliant, but they're jerks, they're assholes.
yeah,
And there's no reason to disrespect or belittle or try and hold power over someone else, which is not necessary.
I agree. And I think the other thing that I am learning, and this is the part that I love about disagreeing respectfully, is it does force you to construct an argument based on fact and data. So when I have a conversation, difference of opinion, or a debate with any one of our leaders, our strategists, I say to them, bring me the evidence. Let's look at what isn't working. Let's look at the data. And then if you're right and I'm wrong, I will happily admit it and tell it to everybody far and wide. So what I also like is that in often in corporations, an opinion becomes fact.
Mhm.
It's opposition, it's subjective. None of that is helpful. What I like is the idea that in a great corporation, you can have a difference of opinion based on robust, substantive data, a
Mhm.
healthy discussion with really good factual evidence that allows the company to be better.
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
think that only happens when I can say to the 2,577, come at me with whatever you've got, because I love smart people who disagree with me, Rowena. I love smart people who disagree with me because it makes me better, it makes them better, it makes our clients' business better. And that's the point of what we do. We serve our clients. And isn't that a cool place to work? That's a much more interesting place to work than a place where you've got to pick and choose your words for fear that you're going to be blacklisted, or,
Mhm.
or, or it's a career limiting move. That's just so boring and so
It's so
predictable.
boring.
Yeah, it is
And
boring.
it's so unhelpful for the business.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah. So now that you've been running WPP for I think a couple of years now, 2 years, what what have you learned or discovered based on your, kind of going in uncomfortable feelings? What have you learned or discovered just through stepping into that uncomfortable growth phase
Yeah.
and learning about what's possible?
I think there are two great things that I've learned in the last 2 years that have really sharpened instincts on people and humanity in general. And the first is that every single person has a very different style. And a big part of my job is to figure out the way in which that individual will hear the message and absorb it and do something about it. And you can't, not all of us is not created equal. We are very different in the way that we hear information. It's my job to adapt to them, not the other way around. I serve at the pleasure of the people that work at WPP, not them for me, but me for them. And therefore, it's me who has to adapt my style accordingly to all of the people to get the very best out of them. And that's really cool. I think that's a really interesting thing you learn. And the second thing is, bad news told early allows you to fix the bad news and turn it into good news.
Yeah.
And so what I'm really loving is how people come at me and say, you know what, Rose, I've got some news. It's not so great. I need help. We're in a bit of hot water. How do we get ourselves out of it? I love that. And that in an honest company where people feel safe, no one's trying to bury the bad stuff or manage up or only tell you what you want to hear. They're actually telling you everything you need to hear. And I love that the lead story oftentimes is people coming to me to say, I'm in a jam, or I need help, or I don't have this. Then you know things are working, because it's the burying of the bad stuff that I think is the toxic part of a company.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I often use the term the crap factor, because every organization you go into, there's always the crap factor. And I like to articulate how a really healthy organization where that's surfaced early, they can actively reduce their crap factor probably to about 10% of people's time. But unhealthy organizations, once the crap factor gets above, say, 20%, so I've been in organizations where it's 30, 40, 50%, and that just means nothing moves forward. Because, whether it's the hiding of bad news or political behaviors or even just bad infrastructure, bad systems, not great leadership, when people's time is just absorbed in stuff that's difficult when it doesn't need to be.
I agree.
That's what drives that high level of disengagement and high turnover, and just that, like, I don't want to be here.
I agree. And I often will say, if there is a system or a process that doesn't work, come at me with a new one and we will figure it out and we will change it. In fact, I had a meeting just yesterday on something that isn't working for us, but there's a better way to do it. And I'm like, great, let's do it. And I could see everybody going, really? I'm like, absolutely, because this makes sense. This other way doesn't. We've evolved enough that we can change what needs to change. Let's go for it. And I'm saying yes. And I'm saying yes loudly. I'm saying yes on paper. I'm saying yes in an email. It's a yes.
Yeah.
And I think that when you can talk about the things that need to work better, you can change anything, and any problem can be solved. But here's the thing, you have to be able to say the truth in order for that process to begin. And the thing I'm learning more and more is I love all the tricky stuff, because when you know what it is, you can attack it, you can fix it, you can move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I loved how you articulated before too about how you see your role as serving. And serving the people and helping them to become better, and how you see it as your responsibility to tailor your style to get the best out of them, which is very much a servant leadership mindset. Have you always had that servant leadership mindset, even when you're in small business, or is it something that's developed more in big, like, lots of people? You said 2,500 people or so.
I think you get lucky in life, and I think I got a great set of parents, and that's the beginning and the end, I think, for everyone. And I was writing an article for something yesterday, and it occurred to me that my parents got it right. They were just very good at teaching my brother, my sister, and I that we are very lucky to A, live in Australia, B, have an education that allows us to do pretty much what we want, C, never forget how lucky and grateful you should be, because things can change in a heartbeat and you can end up in a very different place. And I think when you are in a situation where you realize just how fortunate you are, you always serve, because you also realize that if you're not doing that job well, that can go too. And I am a huge believer in people starting at a place of a glass half full, as in, I am so lucky for what I have, and looking at what I do have versus what are all the things I don't have. I'm always amazed at how people can have a great everything and still complain about the things they don't have in their life. And I think that starts from childhood. And so I think for me in this role, I got lucky. I in the crapshoot of life with parents, I got a couple of really good ones. And that set me on a journey and set me on a road of really thinking and learning about what it means to serve at the pleasure of the people around you, and never forget that it can be taken away from you if you're not doing a particularly good job. I think that's healthy as well. I think there should be a healthy paranoia about looking at it and going, if I'm not serving and it's not working and the people aren't learning and growing, then I'm as replaceable as anybody else. And I think that's not an unhealthy thing to think.
Yeah, and I think that's also a really I think it's a really nice kind of perspective when you also think about, if I'm, for whatever reason, no longer enjoying what I'm doing, it's time to think about something else.
I agree.
So, if you're just not wanting to put the energy in, or it's just not the right fit for you, it doesn't play to your strengths or your skill sets, and it's not something you're motivated to learn, then have the conversation about, okay, well, what else is there? Because, like you said, life is short. Things can be, curveballs come in, things can be taken away, so you have to have that commitment to continuing to grow.
And it was funny when I came in this morning. I said good morning to James, who sits on the ground floor at our reception desk, and I was just marveling at the next generation. And like, if I look at him, if I look at all of our young people, I just want them to love what they do, see an opportunity with us, see a future with us, and see that if I love it, everyone should. Like, if I'm not serving and asking them how they are doing, or looking at James and thinking, what might his future hold for him, then that's a very poor example for anybody else. And I do believe that if you're serving others, then they will hopefully in turn serve others.
Mhm.
And then they will serve others, and we will all be served. We will all be in this together. I don't know any other way to lead, Rowena. I think there's too much of what's in it for me. I'm not sure if that's a tipping point for our nation. I don't know. It's because we are a very, very fortunate country. But I do think that we need to all double down on thinking about others first and how we can help others in the workplace rather than help ourselves.
I think that's yeah, I think that's a great articulation. And also it helps to create that mindset of glass half full rather than half empty. All the neuroscience, and you're probably across this more than I am, but gratitude is one of the biggest drivers of fulfillment.
Yes.
And, as soon as you think, like, I've got it tough, and a lot of people do have it tough. I'm not taking away from tough. But if you can continue to think on, okay, well, what about others? Other people are tough. It takes you away from that, poor me, it's too hard, and puts you in a context of, well, this is tough, but I'm so lucky I still have X, Y, Z. I still have the ability to work if I'm made redundant. I still have good healthcare around me if I have a diagnosis. I still have the ability to get up every day and go and walk in the sunshine.
And I think that's the key. Bad things happen to everybody. All of us have had tragedy. All of us have had something shocking happen.
Mm.
How we react to that is the
Mm.
defining moment of our lives. That's it. And when I look at the people that work here, things will go wrong, wheels will fall off for sure, but it's the reaction. Do they mobilize, roll up their sleeves, fix what's going on, or do they whine and complain and make it worse?
Mhm.
Everyone gets free will. Everyone gets choices to make. Everybody has freedom. I'm
Mhm.
constantly astonished at how few of us exercise that free will.
Mhm.
Someone can cut me off in traffic, Rowena, and I can either get really cross
Mhm.
and speed up and
Mhm.
give them the bird and yell at them and make their lives a hell, or I
Mhm.
can just recognize that there wasn't a car accident. They
Yeah.
probably just for momentarily looked the other way, and
Yeah.
I can just acknowledge them that we're both safe and there wasn't a collision. I'm
Yeah.
constantly amazed at how people take the low road and not the high road. I've got to be honest.
Yeah. I'm with you. And part of why I've spent so much time, I call it uncomfortable growth, but it's what you're talking about, is just recognizing the fact that we have a small self and a best self. But we're wired for fear, and so often we spend so much more time in our small self. And it takes effort to learn how to lean into, but live in your best self,
Yeah.
because of our wiring. But it absolutely is doable, and it's absolutely a choice. And if you step back and think, okay, each of us have X number of days, how do you want to spend them?
I
You
agree. And every day is a choice. And in the inverse, I I was watching behavior that is just unbecoming. There's no other word for it. And this particular individual has been helped every step of the way.
know?
And rather than just say thank you and recognize, they are taking and taking some more. And I'm looking at this in the overall and thinking, so unnecessary. Just stop and see what people are doing for you, see how they are helping you, see what they're sacrificing to make your life better. All it would take is for you to say thank you, to recognize it, and to give back.
Yeah.
And but that's on each of us, right? We all need to look at our own lives and look at the way that we behave and recognize that every day that you wake up is a choice to be better, to take the high road, to behave with dignity and character,
Yeah.
or as you say, Rowena, to be small.
Yeah.
Choice, right? It's a choice.
Yep. Yep. Because we've all got both.
Yep, that's
And
right.
all of us do traverse, but if you can learn to live more in your best self and be less triggered, and don't stay there, like choose to do the hard work to live more into your best self, then you're going to have so many more days of positivity and goodness and growth and learning, and no matter what happens to you. And you were talking about, you like hard truths. I honestly feel this is a hard truth that needs to be had more in society, because like you say, like there's often, at work there's projects or there's whatever's happening, and people are focusing on the projects or the work. But actually what sits behind it is that hard truth, which is you have a choice. And you can wake up every day and you can find it really difficult and moan and groan and be ungrateful. Or you can look around and say, how can I give to others? How can I help others? How can I appreciate and show gratitude to those who are helping me? And how do we create a better day, a better week, a better year, a better life?
And, Rowena, you touch on a lot of these themes in your book. You talk about a lot of this. And I think, quite frankly, most people are unaware of the shadow that they cast when they are on the negative
Mhm.
rather than the positive. And it doesn't take much to look at your own behavior and go, you know what, I'm not my best self.
Mhm.
I don't want to make other people feel uncomfortable, if we're going to use that word, by complaining about whatever's going on. I am just going to recognize that there's a problem. I'm going to be part of the solution. And,
Mhm.
there are people in the world where they enter into a room, everyone is light, everyone is lifted.
Mhm.
And there are people that come in and you feel like there's an albatross around your neck. And I always think to people, they should think, do I want to be the former, or do I want to be the latter? But
Yeah.
there's a choice. And again, I go back to the premise. I'm constantly astonished at how many people don't recognize that they have that choice to make. It's a choice every day, every single day, in every moment. Do I become the person that gives? Do I become the person that takes?
Yep. Yep. And yeah, it absolutely is a choice. And that's why I'm so passionate about uncomfortable growth, because I think it's education is helpful for choice, but it's also, once you've had the education, it's a choice. So you can't hide behind I wasn't aware once you are, but it's also something that you can learn. So, if there's people listening who think, wow, maybe that's me, maybe I need to become better, there are ways to become better. There are ways to be glass half full, to have gratitude, to be thankful, to lean more into your best self, because that's where your growth happens. That's where good things happen, because frankly, people want to be around people who are helping them and are grateful and appreciative, and inspire them to be better people themselves.
That's so true. And I tell you the other thing. I mean, we're talking about the things that I have learned and the things that I love. Being genuinely sorry when it's your mistake. It's really interesting. As a leader, when something goes wrong, and there was a recent situation where something didn't go to plan, and I just said to everybody, that's on me. I'm going to take that screw up. I'm owning it. It's my fault. No one's going to take the hit. Whatever happens, the hit will be me. And there's no but at the end of that sentence. There's no I'm sorry, but, because but is a way to get away from the first part of that sentence, which is I'm sorry. And good leadership is just standing there and sometimes being wrong.
And acknowledging it.
That's it, acknowledging it, because I think if we're going to be uncomfortable, the thing that does, again, another thing that amazes me is how many times people try to replace the word I'm sorry with I made a misstep. No, you screwed up. You were wrong. You didn't do what needed to be done. It's your mess, and we will help you clean that up for sure. But I was wrong. 3 words are very powerful.
Yeah, I agree. And it takes away the ickiness, because when people try, I had a misstep because of blah, 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 or the but, it kind of like people know. And it's just be honest, like put it out. I found it really interesting actually when I was working in the US for 4 years. And it's where I became really aware that Australian culture is much more matter of fact. So, people will generally say in an Australian culture, oh, yeah, like that was a plan, but it just didn't work. Or here's what didn't go right. Or here's what we missed. Right. Whereas when I was in the US, I was like, why are you justifying? Like, it didn't work.
Yeah.
But every kind of function and specialist was like, oh, here's why it wasn't my fault at all. And they would spend so much time and energy defending what was clearly wrong, rather than focusing on, okay, actually, it's helpful if someone says, I'm sorry, because it's much easier to move on. But at the end of the day, like, it's not helpful justifying why something went wrong. It's much more helpful discussing and creating what can go right. And it was a really interesting learning for me, because it's the nuance of it, and it wasn't visible to me before I lived there.
It's extraordinarily powerful to just stand there and be wrong, and to own it, and to apologize, or to admit that perhaps you did something you should not have done, or you said something you should not have said, without any attempt at a justification. I was tired. I'd had too much to drink. Whatever that justification might be, it's I was wrong. I will learn from it, and I will do better. And I will try never to hurt you like that ever again. It works in personal relationships. It works in marriage. It works in friendship. It definitely works at the business level. But I've always admired people who are like, you know what? I own it. I screwed that up, and it was not the right move, and it's cost us. Now we need a plan to fix it. Let's focus on how to fix it. And I do believe that, at every level of government, certainly in our corporations, in the private sector, in the public sector, we could all stand to be just better at saying I'm sorry and being wrong.
Yeah, because no one's perfect.
No one's perfect. No.
What's important is that we learn from it.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Better. Yeah. Wow. So I'm just going to kind of close us out, because we've had the most wonderful discussion. I've loved this. I have a couple of quick fire questions at the end. Um, so what is important to you at the moment in your life?
Fun. That's it. Fun.
That's
Laughing a
good.
lot. Fun.
Is so good. I love
Fun.
that.
Yeah.
And finally, what is a current fear, a current inspiration, and a current challenge for you at the moment? So fear, inspiration, and challenge.
A fear is not remembering all the great moments that I'm having with my nieces and my nephews. My sister just had a little baby girl. She's like 7 weeks old now. And my fear is that I just won't remember how great it was to be there with her the day that she was born. My sister lives in Rhode Island, and my brother and I flew to Rhode Island to be there with her and her partner and the little one, baby Zora. And my fear is that I won't remember what that feels like. My inspiration right now are I have to say, all of the immigrants that have come to Australia, all 740,000 of them in the last 12 months, who are going to build a better life pretty much from scratch, as my mum and dad did. My inspiration is to move across the world to pretty much the furthest place in the world and to start again. And the third, I've already forgotten, Rowena. What was the third?
Challenge. The greatest challenge for you at the moment.
The greatest challenge for me is giving myself a real break, and I'm getting pretty good at it now. When I've had enough, it's enough. The challenge is to never feel like taking myself out of the game or doing absolutely nothing, because I've almost perfected that, doing nothing for a whole weekend. The challenge is never being dragged back into the world of busyness, because I'm not a fan. I'm at my best when I stop and when I know I need to stop. So the challenge is never feeling like that's not okay.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And it is one of those things where, because you're obviously very busy in your job and your life, but we do need to stop. I find I think much better when I have had a stop, and, I'm more creative. I'm better able to be grateful. I'm much more able to live into my best self when I've got that balance between, kind of life busyness to a point, and then just appreciating, relaxing, and reflecting.
I could not agree more. And I think that's be a great place to maybe end this conversation,
Yes.
in this notion of just giving back time. And and if there was ever anything I would want to say to anybody listening, it's perfect the art of doing nothing, because doing nothing well is an art, and I have almost perfected it, and I'm not going to give it up for anything. Being in the moment where there's very little on the agenda, reading a book, going for a walk, having no place to be, that to me is the new joy. So for what it's worth, if you need perfecting, I would say get to it, because it's very helpful.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much for coming on the program, and I look forward to hearing more from you soon.
Rowena, thanks for having me.
If you are inspired but thinking, I can't do that, then you are so wrong. Anyone can learn the art of uncomfortable growth with the help of my flagship program, Uncomfortable Growth, Own Your Reinvention. In this, you will learn to navigate your own internal contradictions to finally unlock the courage and commitment to live a deeply meaningful life by design and on your terms. Uncomfortable growth is about the struggle and joy in discovering who you are, what you truly want, and how to make it happen. If this is something you are ready for, then find out more at www.rowenamillward.com. What have you got to lose, or more importantly, gain?